Committee will come to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the subcommittee markup of the fiscal year 2018 Interior Environment Related Agencies Bill. I want to thank our colleagues, especially Chairman Frelinghuysen and Ranking Member Lowy, for joining us today. But before we begin in the details of the bill, I want to take a moment to thank my good friend and Ranking Member, Mrs. McCollum, for her partnership and work on the bill. But more importantly, I would like each of you to join me in wishing Mrs. McCollum a very happy birthday. Yay. So if we could do our favorite birthday song, this is your birthday song. It doesn't last too long. Hey, this is it. So, yeah. There you go. So if you want to put a motion up, Mr. Simpson, no, I'm just kidding. More importantly, I'd like to thank our subcommittee members for their active participation in our hearing process this year. Our collegiality, and it continues to be a hallmark of our subcommittee's deliberations. Fiscal year 2018 Interior Environment Bill is funded at $31.456 billion, which is $824 million below the FY17 enacted level, and $4.3 billion above the budget request. We've made a sincere effort to prioritize critical needs within our subcommittee allocation and reviewing nearly 5,200 member requests. Subcommittee has again provided robust wildlife fire funding in its fiscal year 2018 bill. Fire suppression accounts are fully funded at the 10-year average level. The committee also provides $5 million increase over fiscal year 2017 for our hazardous fuel accounts. Bill also makes critical investments in Indian country, a top priority of this committee. Overall funding for the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Education is $381 million above the budget request, while funding for the Indian Health Service is $398 million above the budget request. The bill fully funds contract support costs and tribal grant school support costs, provides funding to staff newly constructed health facilities, improves public safety, invests an additional $15 million in fiscal year 2018 to address critical needs of schools throughout the BIE system, and invests an additional $130 million to correct funding disparities across the Indian health system. The bill provides $465 million in fiscal year 2018 for payments in lieu and taxes, PILT, equal to the fiscal year 2017 enacted level. Overall funding for EPA is reduced by $528 million, or 6.5% from fiscal year 2017. Several members of our members will be pleased to know that the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is maintained at the fiscal year 2017 enacted level of $300 million. The bill continues to invest in water infrastructure, cleaning up contaminated land. These programs help create jobs and spur economic development in communities all across the nation. The bill provides $5 billion worth of investment in water infrastructure through the funding in the WIFIA program and the Clean Water and Drinking Water Revolving Loan Funds. The bill supports the administration's priority to begin reshaping the workforce at EPA, and the bill accelerates the cleanup of contaminated Superfund and brownfield sites. Specifically, the bill provides $47 million increase for the on-ground Superfund remedial work and increases funding for brownfields by $10 million over fiscal year 2017 enacted level. The bill also provides $2.9 billion for the National Park Service. The bill increases the construction account by $10 million and maintains increases provided for fiscal year 2017 enacted bill to address longstanding park operations and deferred maintenance costs. We also attempted to address a number of concerns within the Fish and Wildlife Service accounts. The bill restores popular grant programs to fiscal year 2017 enacted levels. It also restores funding to combat international wildlife trafficking, protects fish hatcheries from cuts and closures, continues funding to fight evasive mussels and Asian carp, and reduces the backlog of species that are recovered but not yet delisted. The bill also provides $275 million for the Land and Water Conservation Fund programs that enjoy bipartisan support. This markup is the beginning of a long process. I look forward to coming together as we do each year to find common ground. In that spirit, I will continue to work with Ms. McCollum and the members of this subcommittee. Before yielding, I need to remind members that our committee requires that copies of the bill and the report remain in the room at the conclusion of today's markup. With that, I'm happy to yield to Ms. McCullum for any opening remarks you would like to make. Ms. McCullum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the chairman and his staff, as well as the Democratic staff and my colleagues who all sit on this committee, for the collaboration, for having a very successful 2017 omnibus bill. It was just 2 months ago that we were able to come together and pass a bipartisan appropriations bill that stripped out dozens of riders and provided vital funding for important agencies under this subcommittee's purview. But coming off that recent success, I have to admit I'm a little frustrated to find us kind of going back to square one. The majority party has been unable to adopt a budget resolution in time to inform the appropriations process. And unfortunately, this caused a piecemeal approach to the subcommittee's 302B allocations. In fact, it was only this week that a full list of allocations was shared by the majority. And I know that many on the majority side were just as frustrated by not having a budget number that they could work with. But I do believe that this placed our entire committee's work at a disadvantage. And I'm deeply disappointed that the FY 2018 Chairman's Mark for the Interior Environment Related Agencies Subcommittee cuts funding by $824 million below the 2017 enacted level. This level's too low, and it is a step in the wrong direction. It means that these cuts are going to affect many important programs that are vital to protecting our nation's natural and cultural resources. And those needs just aren't going to be met. Once again, the EPA is hit hardest by the cuts in this bill. The agency is slashed by $528 million. This means that the EPA is shouldering 64% of the allocations cut. Last month during the EPA budget hearing, I was heartened to hear several of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle not only reject the administration's reckless budget request, but also acknowledge that the EPA has been systematically cut for the past 7 years. In fact, since 2010, the EPA has been reduced by $2.2 billion and has 2,000 fewer staff. The cuts proposed in this bill would further undermine the EPA's ability to protect human health and the health of our environment. This bill weakens the enforcement that keeps toxins out of the air and water for our families and for our children. And I know everyone in this committee is committed to clean air and clean water. So our differences are not in the goal, but what we're willing to do to achieve it. So I urge my Republican colleagues to reconsider and ask themselves if we can do better to the EPA. These cuts are just, in my opinion, too deep and unnecessary. And as I said, we all have a stake in the future, and we make this world habitable for our children and grandchildren. Although I cannot agree with the recommended cuts, I want to also be fair. This bill does continue several important programs, and I am very pleased, Mr. Chair, that the committee rejected the administration's proposal to eliminate grant programs within the National Parks Historic Preservation Fund. By including funding for the Civil Rights Initiative, for grants and aid to historical black colleges and universities, and for Saving America's Treasures, this program works towards preservation of nationally significant sites, structures, and artifacts. This bill also, Mr. Chair, I am proud to say, continues to reflect the subcommittee's nonpartisan approach to meeting our federal commitments to our Native brothers and sisters, and it rejects the cruel cuts that were proposed by the administration. The bill recommends an increase of $106 million for programs critical to Indian country. The Tawahi Initiative is restored, and targeted investments are recommended, including $11 million to hire additional law enforcement agents to assist tribes in combating drug addiction. The $103 million for the Indian Healthcare Improvement Fund to reduce healthcare disparities across the Indian healthcare system. This bill also continues our shared commitment to providing Native American students with safe schools that support learning, and fully funds contract support costs so tribes are not penalized for exercising their self-determination rights. But in other areas, we still fall short. The bill recommends $3.4 billion, or 11% of the subcommittee's total allocation for wildland fire. But once again, we have, as a Congress with the majority in charge, failed to adopt a common-sense solution reforms championed by Chairman Simpson's wildfire disaster funding, something that I think we can, Mr. Chair, you and I are always proud to say all of our committee members are part of. I cannot, however, sit by idly while the costs of wildland fires continue to eat up the core missions of other agencies. The administration has failed to put forward any proposals to deal with this problem, which is starkly brought to our attention as wildfires burn in southern Utah and California today. It is imperative that we push leadership for a solution, and we do it together bipartisanly. And then there's PILT. Well, I think, Mr. Chair, we've had our discussions on that, and we also agree where we think PILT should be funded from, and it's not this bill. I do want to, though, however, express my concern and disappointment with the 16 partisan writers in this bill. These provisions seek to turn back protections for endangered species and undermine clean air, clean water protections. And these pieces of legislation do not belong in an appropriations bill. They undermine the important environmental laws and endanger public health and safety. And in my opinion, they benefit polluters. In May, 178 Democrats and 131 Republicans voted together on an omnibus funding bill that ensured the health of the American people and the well-being of the environment were protected. I know working together we can achieve that same bipartisan success again this year, but this is not the bill that's going to get us there, Mr. Chair. So, as I'm being clear that I cannot support this bill in its current form, I want you to know just how committed I am to working with you, with all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, through this year's appropriation process to produce a responsible bill that both parties can support and that we can both and all be proud of on this committee. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. I thank you for the courtesy of the time, and I thank you for the beautiful flowers.
Well, thank you. And I also want to thank our staff for the hard work they put into this, a lot of hours, weekends to get this bill complete in a very accelerated appropriations process. I'm now happy to yield to the distinguished chairman of the full committee, Mr. Friedenhausen.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Calvert, and many happy returns of the day, Betty. Thank you both for working very closely together. Of course, the optic is that we don't work close together, but I think everyone here is proud to serve on the House Appropriations Committee, and there's a degree of committee and bipartisanship sometimes is not recognized, but this is an area where I think a lot of good work has been done. Mr. Chairman, preserving our natural resources for future generations is a responsibility we all share. Pleased that your bill prioritizes the limited funding to programs that protect the environment with a responsible, sustainable budget. For example, in my home state, legislation provides conservation funding authorized by what we call the Highlands Conservation Act, which provides protects thousands of acres of open space and critical water supplies in a state that's highly developed and has a high density of population. This bill also provides critical investments for the National Park Service, and we obviously salute the remarkable men and women who work for the Park Service in a variety of jobs. This bill also provides investments in our national endowments for the arts and humanities, which I strongly support, and continues funding for the Chemical Safety Board. The Environmental Protection Agency is funded above the President's level to ensure that the federal government, along with our state partners, continue to act as responsible stewards of our land, air, and water resources. While New Jersey has many natural treasures, and we talked about them in an earlier bill, agriculture, including blueberries and cranberries, we also have the distinction of having more Superfund sites than any state in the nation, 10 alone in my congressional district. And I visit them every year to sort of lay out the problem, and I'm just pleased that this bill continues to support ongoing cleanup efforts while we hold those responsible, the polluters, for paying the large majority of the costs, about 70%. So I'm pleased by what you've done with the allocation you've been given, and I'm I'm confident in the end we will serve the needs of the nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to yield time to the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Mrs. Lowy.
Well, I want to thank you, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCullum. Happy birthday, and Chairman Frelinghuysen for your work on this bill. As I noted in this morning's full committee markup, our budget and appropriations process has been far from the, quote, regular order that the majority has continually promised. A new bipartisan budget agreement must be negotiated in order to enact appropriations bills into law. With all of these procedural roadblocks hindering our path forward, one might think the majority would produce bills that could possibly gain support from Democrats by, for example, funding critical investments to keep our air and water clean, or they might refrain from adding poison pill riders that would authorize the withdrawal of the Waters of the United States rule, prohibit the use of funds to implement the National Ocean Policy, and even loosen the requirements for use of American iron and steel for certain loans and grants. These riders, coupled with a $528 million cut to the EPA, would be a disaster for our environment and the health of Americans. I've said it before, and I will say it again, members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, scientists, business leaders, and the vast majority of Americans agree that man-made climate change is real. It poses a threat to every living being on our planet that must be confronted quickly and seriously. Unfortunately, the bill before us ignores that reality and instead would expedite the degradation of our environment and contribute to conditions that facilitate climate change. We are at a critical juncture when we should be investing more in preventing climate change and protecting our natural resources for not making draconian cuts that would damage the world for generations to come. Mr. Chairman, I know how hard you and Ms. McCullum worked, and I look forward to working with you both as the process moves forward and hoping we will complete the process so that we could have unanimity and support for this bill. Thank you for your very hard work.
Thank you, and I appreciate your assistance in getting this bill forward today. Are there any other members of the subcommittee who would wish to be heard about the bill before us today? Hearing none, are there any amendments to the bill? Seeing none, hearing no more requests, I recognize Mr. Simpson of Idaho for the purpose of making a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman, I move that the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
All those who favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measure just approved. Let me remind the members, please leave their copies of the bill and report in the room. And I move that the subcommittee be adjourned.
Good job.
Are you guys gonna?